25 years old, also showing signs of the condition of vampirism mentioned.
There is this intense fear of vampires and revenants, people coming back from the dead and haunting the living.
Picture this. You're an archaeologist in Poland, carefully excavating what should be a routine medieval burial. But as you brush away centuries of dirt, something horrifying emerges. The skeleton's head isn't where it should be. Instead, it's been deliberately placed between the legs. A heavy iron sickle lies across the neck, and massive stones pin the torso to the ground. This isn't just one isolated discovery. Across Europe, archaeologists are uncovering hundreds of these terrifying burials. Bodies mutilated after death. Corpses pinned down with stakes and stones. Children buried face down with padlocks on their feet. These aren't the work of serial killers or ancient torture chambers. These are vampire graves. The final resting places of people medieval communities believed could rise from the dead to terrorize the living. But here's what will shock you. Recent discoveries in 2024 have revealed that these vampire burials aren't random acts of superstition. They're sophisticated ritual practices that reveal a dark truth about medieval society. And they're far more common than anyone imagined.
They were basically corrupting corpses that had kind of escaped from their graves and wandered about.
What lies beneath these vampire graves isn't just bones and burial goods. It's a window into humanity's deepest fears and the extreme lengths people will go to protect themselves from the unknown. This is what lies beneath the vampire graves of Europe. Prepare to discover the most disturbing archaeological finds in human history. The story begins in 2022 in the small Polish village of Pien. Archaeologists were conducting a routine excavation of a 17th century cemetery when they made a discovery that would change everything we thought we knew about vampire burials. What they found wasn't just another medieval skeleton. It was the remains of a woman, but she'd been buried in a way that defied every normal burial practice of the time. A heavy iron sickle had been placed across her neck, positioned so that if she tried to rise from the grave, the blade would decapitate her. Her big toe was padlocked to prevent her from walking. In 2024, scientists completed a facial reconstruction of this vampire. What they discovered was even more disturbing. She wasn't some diseased outcast or criminal. She was a healthy, well-fed woman who died from illness, not violence. But the most disturbing discoveries were yet to come. In September 2024, archaeologists in Chełm, Poland, made a find that would haunt them forever: the remains of vampire children. During renovation work near a historic cathedral, workers uncovered 2 child skeletons dating to the 13th century. But these weren't normal burials. One child had been subjected to the full horror of anti-vampire rituals. The child's skull had been deliberately separated from the body and placed face down in the grave. Heavy stones were positioned on the small torso. The burial was located in an area with no known cemetery, suggesting the child was considered too dangerous to bury in consecrated ground.
The medieval vampire is quite different from this Twilight image that we have of vampires.
They would kill your children, they would eat your cow. They were pretty disgusting, really.
Think about the implications. Medieval communities were so terrified of vampires that they were willing to mutilate the bodies of children, their own children, to prevent them from rising again. This wasn't an isolated case. Across Poland, archaeologists have discovered multiple child vampire burials, some with heads between their legs, others buried face down with padlocks on their feet, all showing evidence of extreme anti-vampire measures. What kind of society becomes so consumed by fear that it tortures the bodies of dead children? What were these medieval communities so afraid of that they would go to such extreme lengths? The answer lies in understanding that medieval vampire beliefs weren't just superstition. They were a response to very real threats that these communities couldn't explain or control.
This is probably the most extraordinary deviant burial I've ever seen. I think the message is still the same. It's a very determined attempt to keep this person down.
So what really lies beneath the vampire graves of Europe? The answer is more complex and disturbing than any supernatural explanation. Vampire burials reveal a society living in constant fear. Fear of disease, fear of death, fear of the unknown. When people couldn't explain why their loved ones were dying, they created explanations that gave them a sense of control. But vampire beliefs also served darker purposes. They provided a mechanism for communities to exclude and punish people who didn't conform. The disabled, the foreign, the mentally ill, the socially deviant. Religious and secular authorities often encouraged vampire beliefs because they reinforced social hierarchies and provided explanations for suffering that didn't challenge the existing power structure. Vampires became the explanation for everything from infant mortality to crop failures. From a psychological perspective, vampire beliefs provided a way for communities to cope with trauma and loss. By ritually killing the vampire, people felt they were taking action against forces that threatened their survival. What lies beneath the vampire graves isn't evidence of the supernatural. It's evidence of humanity's struggle to understand and control a world that often seemed hostile and inexplicable. The vampire graves of Europe tell us something profound about human nature, and their legacy continues to influence us today. The same psychological mechanisms that created vampire hysteria in medieval Europe still operate today. When faced with unexplained threats, pandemics, terrorism, economic collapse, humans still look for scapegoats and simple explanations. The vampire myths that emerged from these medieval fears have become one of the most enduring elements of popular culture. From Dracula to modern vampire movies, we're still fascinated by the undead. But the real importance of vampire burial research goes beyond understanding medieval superstitions. These discoveries provide crucial insights into how societies respond to crisis, how fear spreads through communities, and how marginalized groups become targets of collective anxiety. From a scientific perspective, vampire burials are treasure troves of information about medieval life, death, disease, and social organization. They provide data that traditional historical sources often omit. From a human rights perspective, vampire burials remind us of the dangers of othering and scapegoating. They show how quickly fear can transform ordinary people into perpetrators of violence against the vulnerable. The vampire graves of Europe are mirrors that reflect our deepest fears and darkest impulses. They remind us that the real monsters aren't the undead. They're the living humans who let fear overcome compassion and reason. So there you have it, the truth about what lies beneath the vampire graves of Europe. Not supernatural horror, but something far more disturbing. The capacity of human fear to transform ordinary people into perpetrators of extraordinary cruelty. From the elite woman in Poland to the children of Chelm, from the mass grave at Luzino to the twisted corpse in Croatia, these discoveries reveal a hidden chapter of European history that's both fascinating and horrifying. The research continues. Every year, archaeologists discover new vampire burials, each one adding to our understanding of medieval society and human psychology. The field is literally littered with the evidence of our ancestors' fears. These sites are being carefully preserved and studied, not just as archaeological curiosities, but as important historical documents that teach us about the human condition.
Case here talks about a man called Price in 1786. He was put in the fields and a stake driven through his body. Mary Turrell, buried in the high road with a stake driven through her body in the presence of a vast concourse of people.
My research is on the forces required for stabbing with various implements that you find in stabbing events. What we're interested in is how much force was required to stake a human body.
The next time you hear about scapegoating, conspiracy theories, or mass hysteria in the modern world, remember the vampire graves of Europe. Remember how fear can transform rational people into believers in the impossible. The medieval people who created these vampire burials weren't evil or stupid. They were human beings trying to make sense of a world they didn't understand, using the tools and knowledge available to them. The question is, what will future archaeologists think when they excavate our burial sites? What evidence of our fears and prejudices will they find? What stories will our graves tell about who we really were? The vampire graves of Europe have revealed their secrets. But the most important lesson they teach us isn't about the past, it's about the present. They remind us that the real monsters aren't hiding in graves. They're hiding in the fear and hatred that still lurk in the human heart. If this investigation into Europe's darkest archaeological secrets fascinated you, make sure to subscribe for more discoveries that reveal the hidden truths of human history. And let me know in the comments, what do you think is the most disturbing aspect of vampire burial practices?